Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Lauren Kugler with the Community Foundation of the Gunnison Valley. Can all of you in the back, will you wave if you can hear me okay? Great. Thank you. We're thrilled that you're here tonight to join us for an evening of knowledge sharing, visionary thinking, and the presentation of ideas that can help us move into a brighter and healthier future. I want to extend a huge thank you to our sponsor, Gunnison Valley Health. Thanks to our 4 presenters this evening, as well as to Western Colorado University Communication Arts Department and Chad Rich for videography and this lovely mic. And to the Gunnison Arts Center, all of these individuals and entities have taken a leap of faith to partner with us to make the first ever TICtalks possible. I'd also like to thank the Community Foundation staff. It really took a team effort to make this vision a reality. So thank you to Mario Ewell, Alicia Corliss, Scott Krieger, and Laurel Runcie. The TIC in TICtalks stands for Thrive, Inspire, Connect, right out of the Community Foundation's vision statement, to inspire and connect people so everyone can thrive. What you'll hear tonight are big ideas from some people who inspire us. And we believe in the value of convening around important ideas and tackling big issues together as a community. Our presenters this evening work across various sectors and have a wide range of expertise. We tasked them with presenting an idea that they believe to be vital as our community looks to the future. One of the many lessons we learned from the State of the Community report earlier this year is that we can't expect to just fit old puzzle pieces together in new ways, but rather we need new ways of thinking about things. All of these presenters offer new and distinct perspectives that may help serve as a foundation on which to build. Each presenter will take the stage individually. There will be plenty of time for questions and ongoing discussion, but we ask that you hold those until the end of the program for the conversational time out in the lobby. The bar will be open again at 8 p.m., and the presenters will stick around for a short happy hour to continue discussions with anyone who is interested. All of the knowledge presented to you this evening is free of charge and unencumbered by online comment sections and anonymous trolls. Non-anonymous trolls might be here. We are grateful that you all joined us this evening and challenge you to leave with something that can help you and our community thrive, inspire, and connect.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you to the Community Foundation for bringing all of us here and giving us an opportunity to talk about ideas. So Mario talked me into this, and she called me 6 weeks ago. She asked if I was willing to talk about what she said was different than what Lauren said. She said, we want you to talk about anything you want to talk about for 10 minutes, and it just has to be something that would improve the community for everyone, which is kind of a hard question. Lauren's question might be a little bit easier. And I said, no, absolutely not, because we're moving a library this week. And public speaking is scary. So who wants to do that? But she relentlessly encouraged me. And, finally I took the opportunity to potentially embarrass myself in front of the whole town and online. I think they're recording this. So thank you. And I've accepted this as my personal reality, that I would be here talking to all of you. And I wanted to share an idea about how our community can bring good ideas into reality. And as soon as I got to that place, I was reminded of a book. And this book was recommended to me about 15 years ago. And the book is The Nature of Personal Reality by Jane Roberts. And it was published in 1974. And you could generally describe it as parapsychology and the occult. It's unique. And if you don't know about Jane Roberts' work or The Nature of Personal Reality, the librarian who recommended it to me kind of leaned in. and they whispered. So this book is different. They say that it was written by Jane Roberts, but Jane would actually sink into a trance, and something, nobody's sure what, would speak through Jane Roberts, and her husband would write the words down, and then afterwards they would edit them. And he kind of looked around, and he passed the book across the counter, and I read it. And I forgot about the book for a while I was, putting this together, and I took a different strategy, and I started asking people what their idea would be. One idea that would make the community better, and nobody had the same idea. A child said that Santa Claus should come twice a year instead of once. Somebody told me with a lot of vim and vigor that we should completely outlaw any short-term rentals. Somebody wants universal basic income. Somebody else said everybody should want to work harder and get more stuff done. Affordable housing, more options for childcare, and on and on. So let's just take a second and let's close our eyes and acknowledge our own unique personal reality by picturing the one thing that is most important to us. And I would imagine that that's different for each of you. Well, anyway, 2 weeks ago, a copy of The Nature of Personal Reality got donated to the Gunnison Public Library. And I mean, you can't make it up. It was perched on a shelf in the back of the library, and I picked it up. And it was a 1975 copy of the book, and which included a subtitle, unlike the 1974 version. The subtitle, which was perfect for this, was Specific Practical Techniques for Solving Everyday Problems and Enriching the Life You Know. So I opened it up, and I gave it a good half a read, with this talk in mind. And I came across two ideas that'll help me share my idea this evening. The first, the trees in a landscape painting cannot physically move with the wind that may blow through the three-dimensional room. The head in a portrait cannot close its eyes if they are open, but humans move within the framework of the temporal space that we have created for ourselves. 2, as long as you hold a conscious belief, you will experience it as reality. And that one I love. And my idea for tonight is that good ideas, large and small, live and die based on whether or not enough individuals accept them as reality. And that we are fully capable of creating the personal and community realities of our choosing. So let's celebrate this and our own unique reality. If you'll just tell me one thing that feels real to you right now. Go for it. Shout it out.
My beer.
Awesome. David in the back.
You're pointing at me.
Ian.
A chair.
Chair.
89 degrees in Gunnison.
It's hot. Nice. Everybody's different.
Opens the 12th.
Maybe. So thank you for that, and that's a good segue. I think the public library for me has been a real endeavor for the last 5 years. Literally thousands of people have contributed to making that project a reality, whether they worked on it for free or for money, or they supported the library district with a vote for its operations, or they worked on the campaign, they wrote a letter. Thousands of people had to agree to a new reality of their public library. And it serves as a good example for how we can do other things and how we can bring other good ideas into reality. So please join me in keeping an open mind as we come across good ideas. We can look at our own personal realities and better understand how they can join into a healthier, better community reality. So sticking with the 1970s, if you want me, I'll be at the bar.
Hi, team. I know so many of you, but now I can't see your faces, which is perfect. Because I was saying earlier, like, talking in front of 200 people I don't know is fine. Talking in front of 63 people I do know well for 28 years is a whole other level of pressure. And especially tonight, as I talk, there are people in this room who were a key part of my entrepreneurial story, and so that's pretty special. And you certainly know who you are. So that's a pretty neat full circle that I didn't imagine happening. But tonight, what I'm going to talk about, teed up by our beautiful friend Drew, and I love what Drew said about the things that are our reality, because we all want you to leave here tonight and make these ideas your reality, right? So, like, if I ever had a superhero power, what I'd want was to make other people think my ideas were their ideas, especially politicians, right? Because then you could get it done. Sorry to put a dark twist on your concept, Drew. Anyhow, so tonight I want to talk about a concept that really sort of galvanized for me, pardon the buzzword, during my time at Startup Colorado and the work that I did in service to communities across rural Colorado, and it's the Community Microloan Fund. And microloan funds have existed for a long time and take lots of different shapes around the world. What really came home for me was the importance of them, especially for rural development. And so if we look at what I did over my 4 years at Startup Colorado with my team, we worked corner to corner across the state, building resources and a network for rural entrepreneurs no matter where they lived. And in Colorado, that's complex. We know that rural is a big umbrella. And so rural can mean a community of 60, it can mean a community of 6,000, it can mean a community of 60,000, right? It's almost an unfair definition or delineation against urban, right? It's everything outside of the urban context, so it's complex to solve for. But if you look at the work that we did, if I look at the time that I spent in all of these communities, putting in about 25,000 miles a year, the one thing I came back to that I would recommend for all of them was a community microloan fund, and we'll talk about why. Can everyone hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Good? Good. Okay. So what I want to step back and look at a little bit from a small business and entrepreneurial standpoint is the traditional capital funnel and the way that we look at capital that start businesses and some of the challenges with that. So here you have, a lot of entrepreneurs bootstrap. They've saved some money. Maybe there's some family money, some inheritance. Then we can move into areas where they have private loans and bank loans that they can access. And then, of course, getting into other tiers of angel funds and VC, venture capital. So, of course, this isn't everything, but these are the general buckets that you see companies start from. And that's really important to look at. And there's challenges to each of them. So, and some of the challenges is that bootstrapping can be hard. Lots of entrepreneurs, especially rural ones, prefer to bootstrap. It can be hard during times of economic hardship, right? We see less and less savings for Americans. We're on the cusp of seeing less and less homeownership where they can leverage their home for a HELOC or a home equity line of credit. Less and less family money that they could lean on to bootstrap a business. So I think on the midterm and long-term horizon, it's important to look at how to support bootstrap capital. Also, when it comes to private loans and bank loans, they can be hard to attain without sufficient assets. Again, if you don't own a home, you don't have a lot to leverage to get that loan, right? So we have to be thinking about some of these impacts on the horizon. A lot of times, bank loans are going to want to see historical revenues, and that can be really hard if you're a startup. And often these loans can require bridge capital, and so bridge capital is an important component of this as well. Because if you're looking at, say, an SBA loan, a small business administration loan space for $250,000 to expand your existing business, you might need $50,000 to $75,000 at the table to get that funding. Where are you going to get that funding? We need more mechanisms to release money and move money for these companies. And then lastly, not all business models are suited to angel and VC. So in startup culture, there's a lot of focus on these two tiers, but especially in the rural context, this doesn't serve all businesses, right? These are unique, but all of these are important, and all of these are important in ecosystem. But what I like about community microloan funds is that they help service all of it. They help service the funnel. So a community microloan fund could come in and complement bootstrap capital. An entrepreneur could have saved $10,000 or $20,000 to start up their business and need more capital to actually round out their startup package financially. And a community microloan fund could come in to be a mechanism to match that. Additionally, that microloan fund could be the gap funding to access the loan, right? The bigger SBA loan, the private loan that helps move that external money into a community, into a business. And then at the most base layer of the funnel, while all of these things help mature companies who may be suited for angel capital and VC, a microloan fund is just one more component of that. So it helps move and level up companies through the levels of capital based on where they may be starting. But what I love about this, too, from a community development standpoint and from a rural standpoint, is it can support new and existing businesses. And it can also inspire entrepreneurship across all demographics and business types. And this, to me, is really important because especially in startup culture, when we look at small business, and something that became dearly important to us at Startup Colorado was we never wanted to, inside of Startup Colorado, inadvertently create classes of entrepreneurs. If you're the baker and you're starting a bakery, you are an equal entrepreneur to the person putting parts in space. You are taking the same agency and the same risk to go into business. And so a community microloan fund can create that level foundation and platform from which all businesses can start, along with these other mechanisms. So from a philosophical standpoint and a community standpoint, these things are important as well because I think it's about investing in your people, that they are your gold. We spend a lot of time in our communities looking for how we'll attract things from the outside in to bring money in. And this helps stop, pivot, and put an equal weight on the scale to say, how are we going to invest in what's here? How are we going to match this, which you heard in my bio is my mantra in life. Everything I do comes back to this. And it's why it's certainly something I'm passionate about. But if we look at our communities, you know, it's the potential of ideas, the people behind them and the places they create. All the people who create the places here, all of our entrepreneurs. They're core to our fabric. This concept that we're looking at around community microloan funds, I believe sustains access to opportunity. And the places that I came to learn about it in the most meaningful way over 4 years came from places far outside, places we consider startup meccas like the Bay Area and New York. Places that are doing this, one of the strongest community microloan funds is Kansas. And I'll send you to Network Kansas for more information at some point because they do a phenomenal job. I learned about this from third world countries. I learned about this from people doing entrepreneurship in places like Africa. So Colorado has a healthy ego on it, so we really took our time to look outside the box. Where were people doing a lot more with less to create something meaningful? And these are, you know, when we look at the sustained access to opportunity, and this is stuff we can talk, you know, more about at the table tonight, but they're pretty easy fundamentally when you look at them. They're managed by existing fiduciary agents in your community, like foundations. I warned them this was coming. And local banks. I thought about not warning because it's fun. But if it's managed by a foundation, then you can make tax-deductible contributions to it. Am I at 1? 2. Okay, thank you. They can assist with everything from equipment purchases, real estate down payments, and loan access, right? They can start with increments as low as $500. And the average that people say it should be targeting is about $75,000, and that's just based on my research of funds across the country. They have lower fixed interest rates. One of the beautiful things about them when we think about people having less assets or needing to look at new ways of lending capital with lower guarantees, they can be character-based. They can be managed by nonprofit lenders and structures. And on average, they have a very low default rate. That's a 1.5% default rate. And they're empowering your community. And I think from a philanthropic standpoint, they can unearth dormant capital in your community. There's money in every town. Some of it's playing philanthropically. And a lot of it isn't really built to grow into your angel capital, your VC capital. People with that money may not want to move in those directions to invest in business. But investing in a fund that creates access and entrepreneurship and empowerment in your community becomes more interesting. And it can inspire a new breed of philanthropist, right? People who are excited to donate to something that grows. So that's the short and sweet of it with a lot of detail. My clicker died. That's okay. This is where to start. Very simple. Nothing to say here. I'm not going to add more to this at this time. I just want to say I think this is something really important to create. And what I'll close with is that, I've been here since I was 17. This is my 28th year here. There are people in this room who raised me, quite frankly. And there are people in this room who helped me fund my business when I needed it. So I am the result of community showing up for an entrepreneur. So thank you.
I appreciate, and I'm honored to give some thoughts tonight, and got the call last spring. And one of the things I think a lot about, because life is busy and complicated, what are our leverage points, really? We can only do so many things, we can only follow through on so many things. And so sort of pose the idea, what's a big idea for this community? What would we throw out there? So it actually took me quite a while of stewing, lots of bike rides this summer to kind of come up with an idea. And let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. And I thought I'd start with this quote. It's something I've been mulling on for a couple years. Whatever matters to human beings, trust is the atmosphere in which it thrives. An ethicist, Salela Bach. And if there's maybe one take home I would give you, I'd encourage you to read this essay by David Brooks in The Atlantic, America is Having a Moral Convulsion in the Atlantic. And David essentially goes through, takes a historic perspective on the role of trust in communities. And you can see that trust is something that goes up and down. And so trust was something that we regained in the 1890s. There was sort of this huge outgrowth of building of institutions, Boy Scouts, Forest Service. A lot of those institutions emerged then. So taking this historic perspective, you can rightfully argue that we're at a low point in trust. And what I'm going to sort of argue, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly today, is when I thought through a lot of these ideas, I ended up on, I want to try to convince you at the end of this talk that housing for nonprofits is probably going to be one of the most effective things that determines what our community looks like in 25 to 50 years. And I'm going to sort of ground this argument in what it means to build social capital and trust. I started, as pointed out in my introduction, I started working on ants. And so I say I've moved from being a sort of a research biologist to a practitioner. I have to figure out how to get people to cooperate. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. But I'm going to give a couple quick definitions. Social capital, right? So social capital is our network of relationships, our social norms, it's the number of connections, it's the quality and diversity of those relationships. Trust is something that's the quality of the relationship. And then the second idea that I'll introduce is resilience. And resilience, and I'm thinking about resilience as something that's a community aspect. It's our ability to plan, absorb, recover, adapt to adverse events, make hard decisions. And I didn't know that Jenny Reynolds would be here, but really in some ways I should dedicate this talk to Joni. Fire and COVID, the pandemic, are several examples of where our community is tested, and are we resilient to those events? And our ability to be resilient in large measure goes back to the social capital and the trust that we have. So why does social capital matter? There's a lot of great research, and you didn't come to see a science talk, but I could give you one on ants that you really don't want to see. But the evidence is that community resilience, mortality, crime, child welfare, happiness, all of these things that we care about tie back to social capital. And probably one of the more interesting things when you dive into this literature is if we think about happiness, well, money. What's the relationship between money and happiness? The relationship is you get a little more, you're a little bit happier, but it asymptotes. But what's interesting is you're unhappy if someone else gets money, right? So there's a lot of great research that our happiness is often negatively affected by the perception that other people are wealthy and we're not, because we see wealth as a relative thing. Well, social capital is something that we all benefit from when everybody gets it. There's plenty of evidence that if I build relationships, I'm a happier person, and there's evidence that if you build relationships, I'm a happier person. And so putting the emphasis on social capital in our relationships is one of the many things, and maybe the most powerful thing, that we can do to build happiness. Mortality, what's the most powerful way to cut the chance of you dying in the next year? If you join one group in the next year, you'll cut your chance of dying by 50%. Pretty amazing stuff. So what does that mean? What does building social capital look like? And I'm going to go through the talk pretty quickly. So I'm really just trying to sketch out arguments. I'm not trying to go too deep because it's 10 minutes. So on an individual level, I would say it's to engage constructively and with positive intentionality. And what do I mean by intentionality? What I mean is if you're engaging, ask yourself, am I engaging for ego? Or am I engaging because I'm actually trying to make my community a better place? If I'm going to stand up in front of a group and make a comment, am I doing that to please myself, or am I doing that because the group has something that they might take to improve? And so engagement is important. It needs to be constructive, and it needs to be with intentionality. And I think that's something that often we don't ask ourselves, are we constructively engaging? So that's just the individual level. Join. This is an old photo of the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory, 1929. I think Gunnison's first nonprofit, maybe by 30 years or so. I can personally attest that I would not be anything close to what I am in terms of happiness and personal satisfaction without having joined RMBL 35 years ago. And we all have organizations like that we can join, and that's often where we build social capital. And it doesn't necessarily really matter what organization you join. It just matters that you join, and that you join something that you're passionate about, and you use that as the basis for building trust and building relationships. So first, engage. Second, joining is essentially a way of committing long-term to a group of individuals and building those relationships. There are different kinds of social networks. So we talk about bonds. So bonding social networks or social capital are the relationship we build with our friends. It's incredibly important and valuable that you take that walk with your friend, that you spend the time with your mother or your child, and you build those bonds. But we also have bridging social capital, and we have linking social capital. And bridging social capital is how we connect to distant friends, and linkages, this is when we have people that are sort of moving across socioeconomic lines. And when we talk about community resilience, a lot of what is driving that is this bridging and linking social capital. So I wanted to highlight Simba. And I'll highlight Simba not because it's like the organization you're going to go to if you want to do everything you can, to improve health and human welfare, but I love mountain biking. So if I get out 4 or 5 times a week, it's a wonderful week, no matter what else is going on. And so it's something I've been involved on the periphery. But what I love about Simba, as an example of a nonprofit, is they have volunteer days. And those volunteer days, they bring people together from 20-year-olds to 60-year-olds, second homeowners to residents to build trails. And that's bridging and linking capital. Okay. So, final slide. I have 3 minutes, so I'm not doing too bad. So the two sort of last ideas that I'll live with, and I've been thinking about this in the context of Rumble. So for nonprofits, are we thinking of implementing opportunities for diverse engagement? So not just on philanthropy, fundraising, which is often the focus of just paying the bills, but are we providing opportunities like Simba does to bring people together from different socioeconomic groups, different age classes, because that's really building social capital. And there are lots of ways that happens. This event tonight is one of those ways of doing that. But I would challenge every nonprofit to think about, are you doing things that create linking and bonding, or sort of linking and bridging social capital? And then the final idea I'm going to throw out is housing. So why nonprofit housing? So for me, I think nonprofits in the long run, in 25 and 50 years, I think will be the main entities where we create this kind of linking and bridging social capital. Schools are a great place. When your kids go, you get to learn. The parents of your kids' friends, and it's a great way to cross social networks. But nonprofits, I believe, in Gunnison County are one of the main ways that we build social capital. And housing is going to be critical to the health of our nonprofits in 25, 50 years. And so if I were to think of one leverage point, what that one leverage point would be housing that targets nonprofits, that gives them the resources they need to go out and help our community build social capital. And when I was spending some time looking into this research, there was an interesting report on the National Academy of Sciences, and they were looking at how do communities recover from disasters, right? Fire, flooding. And the highest ROI was in building social capital. So we can harden our infrastructure, but at the end of the day, no matter what we do with our infrastructure, something is going to come up that we can't anticipate, and it'll be our relationships and the trust that we have with each other that will determine how our community responds. And so if I would say there's one lever point that we could do to kind of give our kids and grandkids an opportunity to enjoy Gunnison County the way we have, it's to ensure that we have multiple ways to create social capital here in Gunnison County. And I would say the simplest is let's really continue to encourage nonprofits to drive that social capital and give them the tools, and I think housing sits at the center of that. So thank you for coming tonight.
Create a new reality, invest in your people, create opportunities for increasing social capital and trust in communities. I swear I did not line this up, but it seems to go well with the argument I want to present to you tonight. I'll just get right into it. One of my habits is to not advocate for ideas. I'm just a professor at Western. I usually spend time in front of classrooms full of students who are eager to learn new perspectives, and I try not to give my own personal valence to those. I'm sure I fail sometimes, but I'm kind of out of my element, so I'm trying out a new thing. I don't know if this would become a habit for me. I doubt it, but speaking of habits, have you ever been in a habit so much that you didn't realize that it had become a habit? Like you get into a habit, and then sometime later, you have this experience of recognition that, oh, that's a habit. Sure enough, I have that. Habits have that way of being in our lives. They can escape our conscious attention sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And as a social scientist, I'm not interested in boring you with boring text PowerPoint slides, but just to get some ideas in front of you visually as well as what I'd like to say. I'm interested in other habits that we have. As a species, we're animals, we're members of the hominids, we're primates, cousins, and so forth. And so part of what that means is that we're just built to develop habits for all kinds of interesting reasons. Responsibility is one of the things we've gotten into a habit of as a species, as in terms of an obligation, a set of obligations and expectations that is basically universal in all known human groups. So when we think about responsibility, what does that look like? It looks like a lot of things. To be brief, responsibility to self, responsibility to others, responsibility to our communities, to our families. We also expect reciprocity, that they will exhibit a sense of responsibility for themselves and toward us and toward community and so forth. We expect one of our main obligations is to exert various kinds of discipline over our own bodies, over our own morality, over our own decisions, over our own styles of thinking. We've gotten used to being basically good at self-control. And part of what that leads to, luckily for maybe all of us, is a very high level of social order, of social control. So we're good at that. We're in the habit of exerting discipline within our relationships, working on our relationships. We're good at exerting discipline or exhibiting discipline in the things that we get good at in terms of what we like to play or how we like to play, and certainly in terms of the kinds of work that are economically valued and other kinds of work that are not currently economically valued in our world. We're also, as a species, we can't help it. We just are oriented toward meaning making, much more than we are toward happiness. Happiness is important for us, but it is not the most important thing. It's interesting when you look at the World Values Survey, the General Social Survey, the NORC data set, all these different things that I like to geek out about with my students, one of the things that is a through line over the decades since we've been measuring what people care about in terms of values across cultures, across societies, even across ethnic groups within societies, overwhelmingly, people tend to orient toward meaning making, toward having a sense, establishing what their purpose is in life, and having the opportunity to lead a fulfilled life with that in mind. And I would argue that one of the things we're also in the habit of is craving stability. Our habits acquire a stability to them over time. It's one of the reasons why we stop noticing that they become habits. But we require stability in a more general sense. And this is especially true for our children, that they require stability. They thrive best when they have stable situations, when they have stable relationships, when they have stable situations and circumstances in which to grow and develop a sense of the world. And one of the things that concerns me, and one of the premises I want to bring to you tonight, is that I might not be alone here in suggesting that all children deserve stable lives. But one of the premises of that, one of the things that underlies that comes with it, is that we also need to mean and to believe that all parents deserve stable lives. And that our society isn't set up to support those stable lives. We have failed in various ways to instill capacity and circumstances for people to live out the things that we're basically experts at already, orienting toward these habits of obligation and expectation. And that we've taken for granted, if you will, we have come to see it as just an ordinary part of the scenery. Some of the things that I say we need to kick, because I think we're in a habit that I think we need to kick. And one of those, if you've ever tried to kick a habit, maybe one of the things that worked for you was trying to just name it, trying to identify what's going on here. Step one, at least for me, has been to name things. And I'll just very briefly argue that if a stranger or somebody from outer space was to land in our society and learn by talking to someone on the sidewalk and learn that wage labor in our society is the main way that most people are expected to most of the time earn most of their income for most of their lives, they might see that as really bizarre. Perhaps especially in wealthy, industrialized democracies like ours. I would also argue that the patchwork of financial supports that we have inherited and that we continue to try and tweak in terms of temporary assistance for needy families, women, infants, and children supports, supplementary nutritional assistance programs, otherwise known as food stamps. These things have been super important, and they have lifted and boosted the lives of so many since their inception. But they're probably bound to fail, in part because we also live in a society that not only has acquired the habit that I just described, and of taking for granted, if you will, the mandate, the requirement to work in economically valued terms in order to have an income. I want to just let that sit and see if we can see that as kind of a strange thing. It's totally ordinary to our experience, but what does it take to see it as strange? One of the things that I would remind myself and maybe bring to your attention is that a healthy society, the one that generates trust, that has higher levels of trust, that has adequate levels of social capital, that can invest in its people, a healthy society that is active enough, animated enough to generate a new reality, probably should achieve health, if you will, by creating circumstances where people can live stable and fulfilled lives. So what would it take to start believing that each person is unconditionally deserving of a basic level of security? I'll give you a quick and dirty definition. I'm going to run through this side because I'm sure I'm running out of time. 3 minutes. What does basic security get us? Where does it get us? To summarize, I don't know how many academic papers, scholarly studies, quasi-experimental designs, randomized controlled trials in communities where an unconditional wage, if you will, but an unconditional payment has been made to everybody just because. No strings attached. Unconditional and universal. That it supports people's ability in general, not in every way, not in every subpopulation, but in general, the evidence to me is increasingly in, so to speak. It's not definitive, but it's increasingly in that it boosts people's capacity to live fulfilled, meaningful lives and to create situations for the children that are much more stable than the situations that so many of our kids face today. So what could this look like? It could look like a basic income, universal basic income. It could look like, we call it a lot of different things, prosperity projects and so forth. Since I'm rushed, I'm going to go straight to the big one, which is we were asked to bring big ideas here, so why not basic income guarantee? Let's let that stand for big. Yeah, you might be wondering whether this goofy-looking guy is suggesting that people receive a payment every month for just being alive, for being there, for breathing air. And you would be correct. I am suggesting that. Love to talk to you afterward. If you're curious about whether it would induce people to work less, it tends not to, as it turns out. Would love to talk to you as to whether we could afford this. It turns out we can. But are we willing to? And here's the thing. A big basic income guarantee, I know I'm out of time, works probably best at the societal level. And Gunnison is not a society. I'm a geek sociologist. If you ask me, I have to say, we're a community, we're a city in a rural area, and we are not a society. The United States counts as a society. At the federal level, what would it take, one might ask, to scale up the many different options or efforts to instill a basic income guarantee across the nation? And the answer is, we don't know. Sorry, we just don't know. We need to learn more. And we can learn more. Most especially if cities in rural areas step up to the plate and basically offer themselves up as, you can call it a guinea pig, you call it a pilot test community, whatever you want, to figure out, allow the data to be generated, to be analyzed, and see what kind of basic income guarantee could work at scale in the United States. This effort's already underway. We won't be alone if we try this. The Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, MGI, a couple of years ago started off and ramped up. Now there are dozens and dozens of towns, cities mostly, across the United States that are trying it out. There are foundations, university-supported efforts, as at Stanford and University of Pennsylvania that I list here, and several others across the nation and the world, actually, who are trying to study this. Figure out what kind of configuration, a basic income guarantee of a city going big could work in the most efficient way. And so I would close by suggesting not only would we not be alone, there's support here. What would it take for Gunnison to even conceive of attempting to take part in a trial like this? I think we're obligated to try out a different kind of society because it's not working for way too many people, kids especially, who are unconditionally deserving of a stable life. Whether large or small, look, I think cities are laboratories for democracy. And although it would take a lot to figure out how our society could try a big initiative, I think it may be really a wise place to start. And what a courageous thing would it be for the city of Gunnison to give it a go. Thanks for your patience and for listening.
If you're not familiar with Seth Godin, he's a serial blogger, among many other things, and passionate about spreading ideas and changing everything. This was a timely snippet from Seth in my inbox over the weekend that I have to say we gave them a lot of latitude, and so it fits quite well now that I've heard everyone talk. Moore's Law talks about the fact that computer chips get faster and cheaper over time. It turns out that the biggest shift in our culture isn't the changing speed of a computer chip, it's what happens when we network humans together. Adding more people to the internet has accelerated science, politics, and every element of culture. The echoes happen faster, the learning is exponential, and connected communities heat up and morph ever faster. Science used to be a solo endeavor. A monk with some pea plants could figure out genetics. Today, there are millions of people advancing the work of millions of people, with new updates coming all day long. The problems are dramatically more difficult, but the solutions are possible because we've multiplied the speed of change. Thinking of problems as things for individuals to solve is hopelessly out of date. Now, from problems to paradigms. A paradigm is a set of assumptions, concepts, values, and practices that constitutes a way of viewing reality for the community that shares them. Paradigm shifts arise when the usual and accepted way of doing or thinking about something changes completely. Is it time for a paradigm shift, however big or small? Have you ever seen those, excuse me, two-sided puzzles? Any of you that you can do on one side or the other? Many of us tend to complete those puzzles on the same side because the image is familiar. But if you turn it over, it's the same puzzle pieces with a totally new image that maybe we didn't understand or even like before, and now it's one that makes sense. Perhaps tonight our speakers have given us the opportunity to flip the puzzle over. Same pieces, but now a whole new image that has meaning it didn't before. Thank you, Drew, Delaney, Ian, and Matt, for challenging assumptions and inspiring big thinking. And thank you all for taking time to be here this evening. I invite you to join us in the lobby to continue the conversation with tonight's presenters. We will have Drew and Delaney out here in this room. Ian will be over by the front entrance over here, and Matt is stuck down the hallway if you walk through to the cafe back there. And I hope you'll join us for TICtalks on 6th, which is on 6th Street, not the date of today, next Tuesday, September 13th at 7 p.m. at the Center for the Arts in Crested Butte. And tell your friends to join us as well. We have more room in that venue. Same format, different presenters, more new ideas and ways of thinking. See you in the lobby.